We're jumping right into it today. We are going to unpack a topic that is literally sitting in almost every single grocery cart and on dinner tables all around the world. Yet somehow, it's constantly surrounded by these confusing headlines. Yep, we're talking about processed meat. Today, we're going to entirely demystify what it actually is, how it's made at a microscopic level, and what those scary health warnings actually mean for you. No sensationalism, just the facts.
Here is our roadmap for today. First up, what is processed meat? Then, from survival to supermarkets. After that, we'll hit the science of preservation, followed by the health connection. And finally, we'll wrap up with the future of meat. Let's get to it.
All right, Section 1. What is processed meat? Let's define the boundaries.
So, we really need to establish a clear baseline of what officially counts here and, honestly, what doesn't. According to international health bodies like the World Health Organization, processed meat is any meat that has been modified to improve its taste or to extend its shelf life. The absolute crucial point here is that this involves chemical or physical modifications, specifically things like salting, curing, fermenting, or smoking. Simple mechanical processes, like just chopping up a piece of meat or grinding it, nope, that does not throw it into the processed category.
Think of it like this, because this right here is the #1 consumer misconception. A fresh beef burger, that is simply minced meat with no added chemical preservatives, so it's totally considered unprocessed red meat. But a hot dog has been cured and preserved using specific additives, which officially makes it processed. So your bacon, your salami, hot dogs, corned beef, processed. A fresh steak or plain ground beef, unprocessed. It's a really important distinction.
Moving on to Section 2. From survival to supermarkets. Let's look at the history of preservation.
Now that we have our definitions totally straight, let's look backward for a second at why we even process meat in the first place. This didn't start in some high-tech laboratory. It started out of absolute primitive necessity. In early societies, salting and sun-drying were literally life-saving survival techniques for getting through harsh winters. As we jump forward, military needs really put their foot on the gas. In 1821, Boston saw the first commercial meat canning. By 1917, right in the middle of World War I, Chicago meatpackers were cranking out 1.5 million pounds of canned meat every single week just for the troops. And then by the 1950s, those post-war technologies absolutely fueled the modern supermarket boom.
And the scale of this shift? It was absolutely massive. During the 19th and 20th centuries, as cities exploded in population and railroads stretched across the map, the industry underwent extreme industrialization. The traditional friendly neighborhood butcher shop gave way to what was essentially a disassembly line. Workers performed these highly repetitive, specialized tasks to process meat with just mind-blowing speed. This drastically slashed costs and allowed meat to be mass-produced with crazy efficiency on a global scale.
And all that efficiency eventually brought us to a real game changer: boxed beef. Mid-century innovations completely revolutionized distribution. Technologies like vacuum packaging, which, you guessed it, removed the oxygen to stop spoilage, drastically extended the meat's shelf life. This meant you could transport meat over huge distances safely. It essentially transformed meat from this highly perishable localized product into an affordable everyday staple that could sit cleanly in supermarket refrigerators anywhere in the world.
Okay, Part 3, the science of preservation. Let's get into how this processing actually works.
So, how exactly do these techniques magically stop meat from rotting? Well, let's geek out for a minute on the biochemistry happening at a microscopic level. Meat processing relies on a multi-layered defense against spoilage, often called hurdle technology, kind of like an obstacle course for bacteria. First, curing uses nitrites and nitrates, which react with meat proteins to lock in that distinct pink color and shut down bacteria. Second, salting relies on removing moisture. Third, fermentation uses starter cultures, the good bacteria, to create lactic acid, which drops the pH so the bad bacteria can't survive. And finally, smoking deposits chemical compounds from wood smoke that act as natural antioxidants and antimicrobials.
Let's zero in on the oldest trick in the book, salting.
The scientific mechanism here is called osmosis, but hey, you don't need a biology degree to understand it. Just think of salt as a giant sponge. When you pack meat in high concentrations of salt, it literally sucks the water right out of the microbial cells that cause food to spoil. Without water, those microbes simply cannot survive, let alone multiply.
And the coolest part is, you can physically see the results of this science. Sausages hanging in a climate-controlled chamber are slowly drying out and fermenting. Over time, as that moisture leaves and the proteins bind tightly together, it completely transforms the physical structure of the meat. That's exactly how you get that beautifully tight, sliceable texture of a really good salami. It's not just about flavor, it's a literal biochemical structural change.
Section 4. The Health Connection. Here is why this matters to you.
Okay, so we know it's a scientific marvel of preservation. But how do these brilliant biochemical processes actually interact with our bodies? Honestly, is processed meat really that bad for you? This is the ultimate consumer question, right? We've all seen the sensationalized headlines screaming at us about hot dogs and bacon. But what does the actual data say when you strip away the panic and look strictly at the rigorous global research?
Back in 2015, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is part of the World Health Organization, evaluated over 800 studies, and they officially classified processed meat as a Group 1 carcinogen. That means there is convincing evidence it causes cancer in humans, specifically colorectal cancer. Unprocessed red meat was put in the Group 2A, or probable carcinogen category. Now wait, it is extremely important to note, actually, let me be really clear on this, this is not about immediate toxicity. The researchers emphasize that the overall risk is relatively small, but it does increase based on long-term frequency and your portion sizes.
So the crucial point is why this happens at all. The prevailing scientific evidence points to compounds called N-nitroso compounds. Remember how we learned that nitrites and nitrates are added to cure the meat and keep it safe from harmful bacteria? Well, during human digestion, those very same nitrites can react with other molecules in the meat to form these N-nitroso compounds right in your gut. And it's these specific chemicals that researchers have linked to cancer development over a long period of time.
Because of this specific mechanism, global health guidelines aren't out here saying you can never ever eat a hot dog again, but they do strongly stress moderation. A super helpful visual guide for a safe portion size of red meat is about the size and thickness of the palm of your hand, which is roughly 100 grams. Experts generally recommend making processed meats an occasional treat and frequently swapping them out for alternatives like poultry, fish, or plant-based proteins, because those simply do not trigger the formation of those N-nitroso compounds in your body.
Which brings us to Section 5, the future of meat. Let's talk about technology and tomorrow.
With these health guidelines and growing environmental concerns totally reshaping how we eat, how is this multi-billion-dollar global industry actually adapting? Well, we are witnessing some massive technological shifts right now. First, artificial intelligence and robotic systems are taking over assembly lines for incredible precision and food safety. Second, there's a huge push toward clean label, natural additives to replace synthetic chemicals. And third, we're seeing the rise of hybrid meats. Products that seamlessly blend traditional meat with plant-based ingredients like pea protein to lower the environmental impact while keeping that familiar bite and texture.
Let's actually examine that clean label movement a little closer, because there is a really fascinating secret hiding in plain sight here. Manufacturers are working hard to appeal to health-conscious consumers by swapping out synthetic chemical nitrites for natural alternatives, like celery juice powder, which happens to be naturally very high in nitrates. However, researchers impartially point out a catch. Once those natural nitrates convert into nitrites to cure the meat, their biochemical health impact inside your body, including the potential to form those tricky N-nitroso compounds we talked about, is largely considered identical to the synthetic stuff.
And that brings us to our final thought for today. The processing of meat has evolved from ancient, desperate survival to industrial-scale global efficiency, and now it is facing a massive high-tech reinvention focused on health and sustainability. With AI optimizing every single cut, hybrid proteins already hitting the shelves, and even lab-grown cellular agriculture right on the horizon, How radically different is your grocery list going to look in 10 years? It is an absolutely fascinating space to watch.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for more How Meets History.